And I would like to begin with, I would like to tell you that kindly stay in mute mode throughout the session. If you have any questions or queries, please write them in the chat box. All the questions will be answered at the end of the session. Also, questions, there is also one more request, that please do not switch on your video. Please keep it switched off. Wishing you all a very happy Ramzan Eid. Today is the last session of our nutrition webinar series, and I'm sure you all must have had some takeaways or must have learned new concepts in the field of sports nutrition. Before we begin the session, I would like to thank for all the support of the founder members of the association, Dr. Kasturi Sen Ray, Dr. Subhadra Mandalika, Dr. Meena Godhia, our other members like Dr. Nilesh Makwana, Dr. Kiran Sangani, our treasurer, he's the treasurer of our association, Pallavi Savant, Mihira Khopkar, and I'm myself, Dr. Gitanjali Bhide, addressing you today. I'm the secretary of the association. It has been a pleasure organizing this webinar series, and everyone must have really enjoyed it, and we will look forward to organizing some more events to educate and according to our motto, that is evidence-based sports nutrition and sports sciences education. That is our motto of our association. All those who have become members of this association and are attending the webinar series will get a certificate by email for attending the sports nutrition webinar series. Today's speaker is Miss Shona Prabhu. She is the co-founder of Nutrify My Diet. She has done masters in sports and exercise nutrition from Loughborough University, and she has worked with One Nutrition Bangalore, and through her consultancy she provides nutrition consultation to individuals, corporates, sports academies, and various national as well as international athletes, Olympians, and she is also the sports nutritionist for the Indian women's and men's hockey team. She is also a life member of Association of Sports Nutrition and Fitness Sciences. Since she is working with the Indian team, both men and women, we are really privileged to have her on board today to speak about nutrition for team sports. Over to you, Shona.
Hi, Gitanjali.
Hi.
Thank you, for the introduction, and I will be starting soon. I'm just going to share my video and my screen.
Yes. Is everyone audible? Can you hear Shona's voice?
Gitanjali, also, I think you'll have to take off your screen in order for me to share mine.
Yes.
Okay, so if you hear me clearly, I'm going to start. Yes, okay, all right. So good afternoon, everybody. It's really been good to have been invited here and share my experiences, and also, do some bit of education on nutrition in team sports, because I really like sharing knowledge. And I think, if we can all end the last session of these nutrition series by learning and reinforcing some of the sports nutrition concepts that we learned, then I think it's it's a good wrap to the nutrition part of the series, right? Once again, Eid Mubarak to all my fellow colleagues, and thank you for taking the time to be here. We're going to start soon. Okay, so when we talk about team sports, I think it's very clear that there are lots of participants in that team, right? Participants in terms of athletes. So we consider something to be a team sport if there are more than 2 or 3 players for that sport. All right, and I've been privileged to work with the Indian hockey team, and they reside in Sai Bangalore. They do their camps there. I'm also from Bangalore, so access to them for most of the year is easy. Another place that they also reside is in Bhubaneswar. Okay, usually the men's team, and along with hockey, I've also worked with BFC, which is the Bangalore Football Club, and I had short stint with them for 1 or 2 years. This was a couple of years ago, right? And so these are majorly the big team sports that I've worked with. Apart from that, I work with other individual sports and weight category sports, combat sports. But so most of my references today and inputs will primarily be from my experiences with football and hockey. All right. So while like I said, when we talk about team sports, where it's 2 or 3 athletes or higher, right? And different team sports have different number of athletes that are part of it, right? But one overriding characteristic, if you would like to say, is uh, all of these team sports have very high intensity and intermittent activity, which means like if you watched football or hockey, there'd be those sports where there's a lot of movement, right? And athletes are sprinting or they're jogging or they're attacking and running, and then you see other athletes around kind of taking it easy, where there is then time to recover, by means of a slow jog or walk. So this is the main characteristic of a team sport, right? And along with this, there is also, it's categorized into field and court team sports. So for field, there is football and hockey. And then for court, it's more volleyball, kabaddi, basketball. These are court-based team sports. So like you can see, because there's so much of, variability between the games, there are different aspects that you have to keep in mind. Okay, but the first input that I'd like to give you all who are associated with team sports is you're working with the athlete, right? But it's also very important, along with developing a good rapport with the athlete, to develop that rapport with the physiotherapist, with the strength and conditioning coach, with the coach, because a lot of times, even though they have a sports nutritionist on board, you're not traveling with them, right? And nutrition, as much as it is important during training, a lot of it happens even during match days and travel, where you might not be physically present. At least for most of the sports, team sports in India, the nutritionist isn't a traveling nutritionist. So it's really important to have that rapport, so that things that you want to communicate along to your athletes or make sure they're done is kind of they become your proxy basically at that point in time. Okay, so as you saw, these different sports have different variabilities, right, between sports, because uh, of the number of players, with the duration, with just the setting. Some can be indoor, such as basketball. Football is played outdoor, right? So there's variability like that between positions. Okay, so now if I consider football, there is a striker, there's a midfielder, there is a winger, there is a goalkeeper, right? So all of their positions have very different requirements. So when I say nutrition requirements, okay, for a goalkeeper, he may last, someone in the goalkeeping position will play a full 90 minutes, but their energy expenditure is very, very different from, say, a striker who has a little higher energy expenditure than the goalkeeper. And then there's a midfielder, right? So who is mostly doing the running and walking and all of that. So there's difference between the positions, playing styles and matches. So with playing styles and matches, sometimes you go into a defensive mode and you go in an aggressive mode, right? How would that really affect nutrition is more from the sense that if someone's playing very aggressive, or that's the that's the plan or that's the tactic or it's going to be like that, then aggressive natures usually expend more energy, right? And athletes need to kind of recover from that. And no two matches are the same. Most of the time there'll be very, very different variability. If not for anything, if cricket is something I think most Indians watch, and just by cricket matches, you can't predict the duration, the time, and all of that. Right? So that's what I mean by that point. And this is how team sports work. In terms of the energy systems used, right? Which means the type of fuel mechanism that the body uses is all the three, right? So it uses anaerobic and aerobic. Right, so to give you some examples of how it's anaerobic is because a team sport can involve very high intensity activity, which we said is the overriding characteristic. So things like sprints, jumps, kicking, you know, or heading, all of those kind of activities rely on the ATP creatine phosphate system, and then in anaerobic glycolysis as well. Okay, now the aerobic glycolysis part is more with walking and running, and where they use oxidation of fat is more from just the duration of the game. The fact that all these team sports are usually more than 60 minutes long, invariably the body just ends up using fat. So when we're doing a team sport, it is all three energy systems that have to be equally good so that the body can benefit from that nutrition, and we in turn provide that kind of nutrition stimulus to the sport, right? And now if I have to compare, for example, something in terms of athletics or javelin or these kind of sports, these are power sports, and you've already had a session in the beginning regarding power sports, but the main system used here is the first two, which are in mostly yellow. Okay, and the next one would probably be, if at all, green. But other than that, there is that's what's happening. Okay, and so in team sports, it's the third one, which is the blue box that you see. The oxidation of fats is something that is used during training, and it's also used during competition as well. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. When it comes to fueling, right, there are two main things that sports nutrition has to keep in mind. So one is chronic and one is acute. Right, so chronic is through the year, the athletes require support, right? And support in terms of maintaining ideal levels of muscle and body fat, right? So it's an ongoing process where you're working with them. You're also supporting needs of their training program, because as most of you would know, there are usually 3 cycles, which is your pre-competitive, competitive, and off-season. So all of their nutrition requirements are different, and hence you'd be supporting them chronically, right, through the year. Now, acute is really in terms of their training when they have match, because each day you're taking it mostly each day at a time, because the place could be different, the environment could be different. There are different players who might play some matches, some may not play matches, or they're substituted or replaced. So you have to look at each individual differently. And also you have to look at how well they're hydrated over time, because that's an acute function of a nutritionist. Again, based on your environment, based on the number of hours they're playing, based on how many minutes they had during a match, all of that has to be kind of focused and taken into account. Okay, and so here when we're looking at chronic and acute, I would like to also categorize them further when we're talking about training and competition. So during training, the load and the type of training phase matters. Okay, now just to give you a little brief about that, when I say load, okay, it's not all sessions throughout the week are the same. Right? So when I deal with hockey athletes, they have a very nice way of depicting weekly what kind of sessions the player knows. So one is they know their session in advance, and the load is characterized by either red or a green color. Okay, so if it's a green color box, put somewhere Monday on their weekly calendar, Monday from say 5 to 6 is a green box. So that would indicate something like a very light session, a recovery session. They could have, another day which has a red session in the morning, which indicates a high intensity session, and a green session to follow that. Or they could have two red sessions or just one red session. So they get like a weekly sort of calendar, and the nutritionist as well as the athletes know what session they need to know. So you need to first get hold of that kind of plan or calendar, so that anytime you are consulting with the athlete, you know what kind of training phase they're going through, or what kind of from either months together, what is the main intention of their training program, and next from a weekly perspective, what to expect. Okay, so now when they have red or green training sessions, obviously it differs, right, in terms of how you fuel them. Okay, a red session would definitely require um, more in terms of food, and a green session could be lighter. That type of training phase I already covered, which is either they are in the pre-competitive phase, they're in the competition, or it could be in the off season. So I think it's a no-brainer here, but the pre-competitive phase is when the athletes need the most in terms of their energy and nutrition needs. Okay, because at that point they're preparing for competition, so their training is pretty much grueling. It's much more in terms of number of hours that they spend, and the intensity is also higher. Obviously, closer to the competition, they start, tapering, or it comes down, but otherwise the pre-competitive season is definitely higher. Now, after that, in the competitive phase, depending on what kind of match, how many matches a athlete is, undergoing and all of that, their energy levels will, vary, but it will be much lesser than the pre-competitive phase. So, for example, in the match day, they may just do a 1 hour, match. Maybe if it's to do with hockey. If it's to do with football, it's a 90-minute match. And then if it's volleyball, it could be something else. Basketball has different, quarters. So on a match day, the intensity may be high, no doubt about that, but the amount of calories they need may be different, because they're just doing kind of one session, right? And when they're in competition, they may not even be playing every day. So something like hockey doesn't have matches every day, but football, on the other hand, could have matches every day. Basketball could have, when they play the, do the playoffs and everything, they could be. And it really depends on, whether you're playing a league, whether you're playing state, whether you're playing national. So everyone's tournament calendar is very different. So though the team is in competition, they're not actively engaged every single day. It may not be the case. So then in a competition, season, you may have uh, athletes who are, playing the game, then they have a rest day in between, then they could be playing another couple of days, or they could have rest days. So that's why the competition energy intake is lesser. And then off season, obviously at that point, they're either not training, or they may be training with their own means, depending on what kind of off season they're having. So the off season calorie requirement sort of becomes like you and me. Okay, that's when the athletes become more recreational than professional, right? And another thing to consider also during training is, their physique and body characteristics. Okay, for example, when for the female hockey team, the cutoff for body fat is between 16 to 20. So now when you're, fueling them during training, if they're not matching up to these, say, body fat requirements or weight requirements, then you have to fuel them a little more differently, right? And during competition, uh, it's the, like I covered this initially, the position that you play, it depends on that. Like if you're a goalkeeper, you obviously don't need as much in terms of energy like your midfielder would need, or someone who is constantly running back and forth, right? During competition, also something to keep in mind is recovery time between matches. So if you have continuous matches, then nutrition recovery strategies are very, very important. because otherwise the body's glycogen gets depleted. Right? So now when we talk about glycogen, all of you are aware that's the storage form of carbohydrate. But if you don't, replenish this carbohydrate, then it's very difficult to play with the same intensity, the same stamina and energy the next day, right? Especially when it's back to back. So that's when nutrition strategies become extremely important. And like I said before, matches could vary in terms of the style that is played, in terms of whether athlete is playing the match or not, whether they're defensive or aggressive. So all of these things are, um, important to keep in mind. Okay, so having said all of this, what is clear is that to have very specific guidelines for team sports is very, very difficult to do, right? Because there's so much variability. But there are some general guidelines that you can start to implement and then always build up. So your own personal experience, listening to experience from other, coaches, the physio, the strength and conditioning, all of these, inputs are very important when you start to formulate guidelines for team sports. Okay, and you kind of put your own personal touch to it. So, for example, now I'm still on the second slide, guys. So, just uh, uh, I want to go through some more points here. So, especially when we're talking about during training, right? Breakfast now, um, a lot of times athletes don't tend to eat enough before their training times. And this is especially when they're early morning sessions. Okay, just to give you an example, like when we have hockey sessions that are at 8 a.m. in the morning, usually breakfast is had, before that, because after that becomes too late. And so 8 a.m. is the session time. So athletes are supposed to be having their breakfast at least by 7 so that they have enough time to digest. Now think of this, there's a 8 a.m. red session, right? Which means it's a high intensity session. But so many times when, taking dietary recalls or when working with new athletes who are just, coming into the system because they've joined the camp or they've got selected, I often hear them tell me that they've just had papaya, some egg whites, and maybe a glass of tea before their morning, training session. And being in that professional stage or career of their life, they can easily do the session. Doing the session is not a problem at all for athletes at that level, right? They'll do 90 minutes of grueling training, workouts, whatever you ask of them, because they are professional and they've done this for so many years. It's a different case if you're doing it, if we, on the other hand, are going to attempt a session like that. But the point I'm trying to make here is they can do it. So, when I inquire with them and I ask them, okay, are you sure you're just eating this? They say mostly, yeah, this is it. And this is where you have to, uh, kind of come in and let them know that it's actually they have to start eating more. So you will get queries like, how can I eat more? I'm too full, I can't, it makes me full, I can't really then play on the field, practice, it becomes difficult. But through my experience, I've realized that you have to first give them small easy steps to do, right? So just ask them to include one new thing to their pre-training meal. After they've done it for like couple of sessions, ask them to add another thing. And in that time also ask, let them track what their energy levels are like, what their recovery meal, what their recovery feels like, because more often than not, they will start to feel better, and then they will understand that, these are things that actually improve their energy levels much more than what they, thought they had, right? So the next thing is, you also notice that on recovery days when they're not supposed to eat as much, okay, that's when they have all the time in the world to eat and they relax. So that's the time they tend to eat a lot more than what they should be doing on training days. Okay, so uh, that's another area which, you have to address with athletes. And then when you're looking at time, right? Something that chronically you have to keep in mind is that they don't train at the same time every time. This is something that I have realized with team sports, because when I work with individual athletes, which is say swimming, to give you like the easiest example, they usually train from certain hours during the day and evening, and it's consistent throughout the year, right? Maybe 1 or 2 months in the year it could be different, but otherwise they start and they end at the same time. But with team sports, they could do very, very different times because of the availability of the ground, because of what conditions they want to train under. So recently, the hockey teams, the men's hockey team was training between 12 to 2 in the afternoon. Right? It's quite a harsh time to train, but they were actually doing this because it just made it. They wanted to face those conditions that they might face in this summer in say Southeast Asia, where the Olympics was going to be held, and they wanted to do it in the harshest timing. So for them, it was 12 to 2 previous camp, it was 8 to 9, then in between it also became sort of 10 to 11. So athletes need to understand how to fuel in such conditions, and if you aren't in a position to be with them all the time, and because of what your contract may be like, or how many hours you spend with the athlete, it's very important while you're giving them suggestions to also let them know that you could have different timings. And though they may come to you with saying that, okay, right now in this camp I'm training at 8 to 10, you never know if you might meet that athlete again or not for whatever reason, right? So always give them examples of what they can do if training was at a different time, right? You can come up with a time and also test if they know what to do in those conditions. Okay, so yeah, that's what I wanted to cover with this slide. Right, moving on to the next one. This I'm going to go through very quickly because I know all of you have gone through these tables in the past. This is the last one of the nutrition session, so these would have definitely been covered. But like I said, with fuel needs, energy is much more the pre-competitive stage than it's competitive and off-season. Okay, in terms of decreasing order of how much energy they need. And remember one thing, that your energy needs are, this definitely highlights that energy needs are not static, right? They keep changing through the year. And one question that commonly comes up is, how do you calculate calories? What formula do you use? How many calories to give an athlete? And now, after being in this field for almost a decade, for me, I do the energy calculation as a one-time activity for that phase. Okay, so say they're in the pre-competitive stage, I know that the energy requirements are really high, so I would calculate it once. Okay, then I would go to the competitive phase, but competition phase is very difficult because you don't know how much their exact energy requirements will be, because they're not doing team sports, at least is not in a steady state environment, right? It keeps changing. So it's very difficult to figure out energy requirements from that aspect. So what you kind of go by is their recovery, their feel. You do more like uh, to give you ratings, okay? Because at least you know then that they're recovering or their energy is good, and that's the most important part during competition. The next thing is uh, yeah, so when we're looking at energy requirements, it's very important to have a base and keep building through that, right? And like some of the equations that I do use would be Cunningham or Catch McCurdle's formula, because it takes into consideration lean body mass, which is on the higher side for athletes, and that's what kind of increases your RMR and your overall energy requirements. But don't my advice would really be not to break your head on figuring out the exact calorie requirements, because one is in real life situations that could change. And sometimes trying to get that exact number, which we may do initially at the start of our career, might not always make practical sense when you're actually working with the team through uh, through the year. Right, now the next one is in terms of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates is the dominant fuel source for team sports. And the reason being is it's high intermittent activity, and there's also anaerobic energy systems that are used, and carbohydrate plays a role in sort of both of them, right? And So while this becomes your dominant fuel source in an Indian athlete's diet, I don't find it very challenging to meet these values because we predominantly focus on eating carbohydrates. That what will become a little bit of a challenge is when you have some athlete whose weight or body composition has to be fine-tuned, and that's where you have to play around with your carbohydrates, right? And um, so I would, mostly what I usually do in my practice is give them most of the carbohydrates around their training timings, and uh, apart from that, then I try to just, make sure there are low carbohydrate sources or protein sources or even fat, so that they don't feel, hungry, and the carbohydrate intake is also modified and met accordingly, right? And coming to protein, usually for team sports, it varies between 1.2 and 1.6, but it can go higher as well when it is in the pre-competitive phase, right? A lot of athletes will, the first thing that comes to their mind when their intensity increases or when their training loads increase is, okay, let's double the amount of protein we're having. Right? So I very often get this, that, earlier an athlete was taking 1 scoop of protein, but now that they've the training session they know that this month is going to be tougher. They on their own double the protein, but they don't double the amount of carbohydrates, or they don't increase the amount of carbohydrates they're eating. Right? And that's also another misconception that you have to break. Yes, your protein requirements will increase, and as you know, you might have definitely learned this in the other sessions this week, is that protein has to be broken down and given through the day, as in distributed equally, or made sure that there are no long gaps between sessions, right, between meals. So protein has to be given in that fashion, and it's also very important to focus on protein when they're not in their camps. Okay, like for example, when it's hockey, they are in Bangalore for about 3 to 4 weeks. Their camp may be that long. And after that, they're off their camp for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, depending on, what time of the year it is. Now, athletes also have another misconception that when you're not training, you don't require protein. And what they don't fail to understand is that protein is important every day of the year, but carbohydrates or fat is what can actually change, because those are not going to be used as fuel in your off season. Like the requirements are not as high. Okay, and also to touch on protein, I want to give you an example of where distribution becomes a problem. That you know that per meal you have to get at least zero point 0.3 grams per kg body weight, and this has to be distributed along your main meals and snacks. Now, if an athlete, say someone has had a really grueling session and they finish their session by 7 p.m., right? And athletes usually, when they're in government facilities or in their academies, they tend to have, I mean, at least the teams I've worked with, they've been very particular to have dinner by 7:30 or 8. So think of a situation where your athlete has, you know, your athlete has finished their session at 8 o'clock, right? And sorry, 7 o'clock. Now it's time for recovery. So they've had maybe 1 scoop, or they could even go to 2 scoops, depending on what that session is. This is because of lack of knowledge. Okay, that's where you have to come in. After that, it's a non-vegetarian athlete, so they're actually having chicken, dal, all of that. And very popular among male athletes is to have at least half a liter of milk before going to bed. Right? So if you just kind of get a ballpark figure of the protein, it's probably half of the requirements they need in a day, which they're all packing in that short period of time between 7 to 9. So if you look at it practically, the athlete is thinking that, I've made sure I've got all my protein and all of that, but they've got most of it at one time, which is not going to benefit the body. So um, uh, also, when it comes to, say, working with these hockey athletes, realize that if they had their one session at 8 a.m. and then another session at say 5 p.m. After the 8 p.m. session where they finished their training by about 10 a.m. They've had their protein then, and between 10 a.m. and their evening session when they get over, the amount of protein that goes in, because lunch is the only other time they can get it. And at lunch, not a lot of athletes prefer to eat non-veg because they have another session in the evening. This is not true of all athletes, but just some of them, some cases that you may come across. So if they've just eaten something like dal and curd for lunch, then they've hardly got their protein distributed through the day. So most of it comes just in the evening, right? And that's why you have to get them to understand that you can have your protein before and after. And also, if you've come across some latest research, there is especially with protein, you don't have to have protein always after training. If an athlete is not able to fit in that protein and distribute it through the day, you can also give the protein say 1 hour before training, provided the athlete can digest it, obviously, but that protein remains in the body and can be put to good use. So it doesn't always have to be post training protein that has to be consumed, right? It can also be done pre training. uh, the next thing is fat, right? The importance of fat is very critical because it's a building block. It's like you're starting, like if you're building a house, right? Your fats are like the kind of cement that you put between bricks, because without that cement you can't put the bricks, and without the bricks you can't build that foundation for your house. So fats really act like that because they are central to all your cell membranes and different functions that they have. So and it's very, very important at this pre-competitive season, right? As you know, fat is the highest, gives you the highest amount of energy per gram, and at the pre-competitive phase you need a lot more in terms of food, right? Another practical situation here is when the intensity increases and when athletes are doing a lot of training, sometimes they're not even in a mood to eat food. Like they may just finish a training session and all they want to do is sleep or rest, and food is really the last thing on their mind. So including fat foods help them provide the energy that they need to meet up overall calories. They also then act as a fuel system, because in the pre-competitive stage a lot of them are working on endurance, right? And endurance really uses fat as one of their major fuels as well. So, this is just a gist about fuel needs. I have made some points on my own here, so I just want to make sure that I've, covered all of these. Yeah, with fats, another example that, I want to share is many athletes, now this is with the women's team, right? They feel that since they've been training, they can actually put on that extra teaspoon of ghee or butter, and that always comes up. And in my opinion, I think it can definitely be done, but it depends on what time of the year when you're having it. So ghee is good, you can definitely have it, but it doesn't make sense for you to put that extra teaspoon of ghee on the day where your energy requirements are not that high. So that's just something that you have to kind of sow that seed in an athlete's mind for them to really think and understand that their food is not the same through the year. Most athletes think like that okay, you've given them one nutrition plan, so that's something that they'll follow through the year. But what you have to make them understand is that their needs keep changing, right? And a small example could be fat, because it may just seem like a teaspoon, but it has a lot of energy and calories. So this particular athlete was really struggling to bring down her body fat. She's a very good athlete, and undoubtedly, whether she was a little overweight or whether her body fat was slightly higher, her performance on the team wasn't in question, right? But most of her team knew that if she could modify her body composition, she would do even better. And that's exactly what happened, but it came through making these changes like that. So before, we touched up on the ghee, we did a lot of other things. And then she, she did it, she didn't lose weight, her body fat didn't come down. And then over a period of time, she decided that, let's not do the ghee. And the ghee was becoming a problem when she actually went home. Okay, so that's the other aspect that we have to cover, because all of these team sports are, when they're in this controlled environment, when they're training regularly, when you are in constant touch with them, things go smoothly. But the one challenge that you will face with team sports is when they're off season. Not even off season, when they're actually in their season, but they have these breaks in between. So this is something that I had prepared for the, hockey, the hockey men's and women's team, because we had done like a group session, right, an education session. And what I figured is carbohydrate, though it's the most dominant fuel system, it wasn't a very high, athletes were struggling to meet that. Now, I did say that Indian diets, usually have a lot of carbohydrates and it's not a problem. That's true for most of the meals, but not around training. Is my experience with it, right? Especially early morning training. So when we were doing these group sessions on the importance of carbohydrate, and especially because obviously this is something about, I'm talking about Feb and March, okay, 2020. Now the team was building up to the Olympics, which was supposed to happen a couple of months down the line, which did not. So at this point, when I was consulting with them, I realized that, okay, their training load, they're getting into that pre-competitive kind of season training. Their carbohydrate requirements are high, but athletes were not focusing on carbohydrate. They just made sure they have enough protein. So we sort of did this, I just gave them a very small kind of creative on how they can, choose carbohydrates, because you do these education sessions uh, for that moment, for the 5-10 minutes or 1 week, it's in their head, and after that they tend to forget about it. Okay, so if you see, what I've mentioned with the red session and the green session, that's the kind of that's what they do in terms of understanding, right? Red session is more intense, green is lighter. Now, uh, for them to understand how much carbohydrate to have. So this is sort of helping them translate numbers into more action points. Right? We know for good recovery, like, at this point in their training, they had 2 red sessions per day. So one at 12 o'clock and maybe one around 6 o'clock. Right? So recovery time between sessions was less than 8 hours. Uh, and and it was both red sessions which were higher. So uh, I knew that carbohydrate would be a factor which would kind of pull them down. So I made this creative for them. So one is for them to understand, okay, based on their weight, how much carbohydrate they need to be having, and an example, right? Because it's important for them to know how to calculate it. This is with numbers. So, and I specified, again, this is mostly after a red session, because the green sessions are very light, right? It would just be like something that they could do without even preparing for. So after the red sessions was mainly the requirement. After a green session, I've mentioned just fruits or dry fruits, because uh, it would be something like a snack to have between their main meals. So they're not really tired after that session. Right? And also the list of carbohydrate foods that they could have and how much carbohydrate they get. Okay, because if I go to this slide, now this will be in a lot of, sports nutrition books. It would be in new research papers, and this is good for us to understand. But how do you translate this information for an athlete? So here I'm looking at speedy refueling. Okay, and so because most of their training was like that, we take the most updated research and then put it into practice. Um, but for them to understand what it means, you need to have you need to put it sort of in this kind of pictorial diagram. Okay, I'm sorry about these doodles that have come up. I'm actually not doing that, but anyway, as long as you can see, as long as you can see the material. Okay, so now when we say 1 to 1.2 grams per kg body weight, we actually need to, let the athlete know based on their body weight how much to kind of get to, and then also give them food sources that they can actually choose out of that, right? So this is, now I have chosen these particular carbohydrate foods because that was what was accessible to the athletes at that point, right? If it is, if you can put very different foods, but if they're not really accessible to someone at that point, there's no use. So these are all accessible. And again, there was, you have to mention, okay, what kind of training time schedules can they have it? Because if they're having their session at 2 o'clock, sorry, 12 o'clock, it's going to be followed by lunch, right? But this was more if they had their training session at 8 o'clock, which they would finish by 9:30 or 10, and then their next lunch meal would be at, 1 o'clock, say, for example. So you also have to know, give them the reason on when they have to really have this, okay? Because they can't again follow it blindly for all their training sessions. Right? These are, I have the slide on because this is the carbohydrate is the dominant fuel source, and we need to really understand how much carbohydrate an athlete requires, right? And these carbohydrate, it's just important for us to put this into a more practical perspective, right? So if you're looking at someone with, a minimal exercise, then it's 3 to 5 grams. But when you're looking at something high, 6 to 10 grams, like the 10 grams is quite, a high range. And I think for most of the team sports, that 6 to 10 grams would just be in the pre-competitive phase, but otherwise 5 to 7 grams is really what most of them can manage well on, right? And yeah, so other kind of situations that come up which become difficult is, or a little challenging, when they're out of their training environment. That is when they're off camp, right? So the challenges that usually athletes or you as practitioners might face is when you're at home, right? Now, like I said, for hockey, their camps may be 3 or 4 weeks, and then they have 1 to 2 weeks of break. What it does, it makes life a little difficult for the athletes because they have to keep transitioning. And though it is something that they've been doing for years together, it still doesn't become a routine that they've stuck to, which says, okay, I'm going to eat a certain way there and I eat a certain way at home. It keeps fluctuating. So that becomes a little bit of a roadblock, especially when you're looking at working with athletes who have to change body composition and so forth. So how this becomes challenging is, one, because of the type of food they may consume when they're at home, right? So when they're off camp, they could be at home or they could be at work. So a lot of the senior men and women are, they also have to report to government jobs that they've been selected for. It could be police, it could be with the oil segment, it could be with the army. So when they're off, it's not necessarily that all of them are at home, but they can also be at all these different workplaces. So now when they're at home, the type of food could matter a lot, because I have more than a handful of athletes who actually are non-vegetarian at camp, and then when they go home, it suddenly changes a big deal, right? Then pressure from the family, right? So I think all of us have faced this, where we go home and then everyone wants to feed us, right? And athletes are no different. They get the same kind of pressure, and a lot of them succumb to it, right? And so here it becomes really the ownership of the athlete to to let their parents know, and this is something you have to encourage them to do, right? They may want to do it but don't have the heart to do it. So I always have a session with the athletes and let them know that you have to take ownership of this, because if you come across being half-hearted or neither here neither there, the family is going to take that 50% of you which gave into that temptation. But if you actually set the ground rules with the family that this is my profession and this is how I'm expected to eat, then the family will understand. But if the athlete doesn't take ownership of that, then it becomes difficult. So you have to convince and encourage the athlete to do that, right? Affordability. Now here is, especially when I have some athletes from the team who are from the Northeast, right? And or actually that was more cultural. Sorry, affordability could be, at the camp they get a variety of different foods, they get selection and so forth and so on. But you have to be, you know, you have to know that some athletes don't actually come from very affluent or very high socioeconomic backgrounds. So for them, food at home is a very simple affair, and at that point, to meet all of the requirements may be difficult. But you have to help them with the best possible way. Cultural is more when they're eating a certain way at the camp, but back home it's very different. And I've found this mostly with the northeast kind of athletes I work with, because at the that's where they predominantly eat white rice for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. And if you take for example someone like Sunil Chetri, he has a very very different approach to nutrition and food, and he has the means and resources, right? Someone who is more from a lower background may not be able to do everything that you expect of them. Even buying, say, nuts, for example, eating, enough curd or getting non-vegetarian foods may be difficult for the family. So they go back to eating just simple rice, dal, sabzi. So that has to be factored in. And when I say time management, it's again when they're home, the routine goes for a toss. Like for most of them at this lockdown period, it's gone for a toss. So similarly, athletes face this more regularly, right? So um, when it comes to time management, if they don't wake up and don't sleep on time, then all their meal patterns also keep changing, right? They wake up a little late, they don't want to eat breakfast, it goes to lunch, then they sort of do the snack and dinner. So if you don't have a time or routine in place, then it becomes difficult to schedule, uh, uh, to work around a good nutrition plan. So that's something that they have to be taught and encouraged. Now when it comes to them working, one thing that really comes up is sometimes they don't get food. They have to they have to fend for themselves, which means they need to know how to cook, right? So again, you have to give them very simple recipes. So I always get them to take a small pressure cooker with them everywhere so that they can make one pot meals, right? Help them make one pot meals, which is very easy for them to do khichdi instead of doing rice separately and dal separately, like khichdi. And as all of you know that you can put a lot of vegetables into it. You can cut up a salad on the side. You can eat curd on the side. So say if you ask them to make khichdi, but also give them curd or egg or salad on the side, you can still balance it without them having to really cook, the other accompanying meals. And if you get them to make like say a paneer with vegetables, you stuff them in say a chapati. You do get ready-made chapati, so sometimes they can even take use of that and give them again a salad on the side, because they don't have time to cook that separate sabzi, right? Because even at work they're expected, like when it comes to training they can put hours together. When it comes to working, even like 2 3 4 hours tire them a lot, right? Because it's something that they're not used to. So giving them easier meal options uh, is important, especially like one pot, simple things that they can do. And also when they're working, the concern is concern is they may put on weight. So at this point, low carbohydrate options at dinner time are things that you can definitely suggest to them. And injury is, it just becomes challenging for the reason that if you have an athlete in the team that is injured, uh, the motivation levels are not very high. The incidences of them eating are eating irregularly, unwanted meals, high fatty meals, all of that kind of becomes difficult to monitor and control sometimes. But you have to just make sure that there's a limit beyond which their weight or body fat shouldn't increase. I think some leeway uh, you know uh, is natural to give them, but then you have to keep that in mind. Okay, so I have another thing that could come up with team sports is the fact that they like, especially if they're playing, if you're associated with teams that are in an IPL setting or a league, then there are a lot of foreigners that are part of the team, and their eating habits, their lifestyles could be different, which also influence other, athletes. And here, one challenging part was to do with alcohol, right? So for some athletes, some foreign athletes, it'd be very natural for them to, grab a beer or a couple of beers and sort of relax with that on the recovery days. For Indian athletes, it might not be the, norm, or it may not be natural to them, but it's very easy to kind of get drawn into that situation. So if you need to, get external help to handle that better, then that's something that you can definitely uh, make good use of. Okay, when moving on to hydration, right? It should be individualized, right? So that's important with hydration, because there are athletes that could be very, very heavy sweaters, and usually higher body weights tend to sweat a lot more. That's pretty much a given. So making it individualized is important here. Okay, and so when I say individualized, you know that mostly for hydration, athletes use sports drinks. But if you have someone who's a very salty sweater, very heavy sweater, the amount of sodium that they lose might be very high. And just a sports drink may not cut it for them. Right? They may still cramp in spite of doing the sports drink. So at that point, it's not for us to just double the sports drink. It could be using an electrolyte tablet into the sports drink, or using electrol, the green and white drink that you the powder that you get, not obviously the whole sachet, but because it's very highly concentrated, you can use a bit of that into the sports drink. And obviously you have to, again, there's no set ratio, but you have to play around with it and see to what level the athlete actually feels comfortable, or stop sweating as much, or is able to prevent cramping, right? So if the athlete has a little more salt in their body, they'd be in a better position to retain that fluid. So that's where I mean it has to be individualized. Okay, now also hydration is important at different times in their training and through the day. And one time where athletes don't turn up hydrated is when they have early morning sessions. Okay, so invariably they come, if you just ask, like, they focus on the food pre-training, a lot of them forget to include fluid. So a general thumb rule is I get all my athletes to practice drinking water as soon as they wake up. If you ask your athletes, most of them might not drink enough water. They could say, maybe have a sip or two or three, but get them to have about, one or two glasses by the time they come to their training. And it's something that they have to develop over time, but it's definitely possible. Okay, the next thing is with lighter sessions, right? And if they have lighter sessions, at this point you don't need obviously a sports drink every time, because their energy output or their carbohydrate requirements may not be as much. So on the lighter sessions, you could just focus on pure water. But if the temperature is high and they're training in a hot and humid condition, definitely an electrolyte tablet would. A lot of athletes don't know the difference between electrolyte tabs, electrol, isotonic sports drinks, BCAA. They feel like all of them are the same. In my experience, most of them use them as just flavoring drinks, right? Monday ko I had electrol, so on Tuesday I'll have BCAA, on Thursday I'll have an isotonic sports drinks. That's how the routine kind of goes. So you have to also check in there, like, do they know what their sports drinks mean, and when they should actually be consuming it, right? So next, when it's heavy sessions, definitely a sports drink is needed at that point, along with water, right? And after the session, get them to have at least, like, like I've done the slide for carbohydrates, I've done one for hydration, which kind of gives them an idea of how much water loss happens while they're exercising, and how they can rehydrate. Right now, when you just tell them, okay, you have to rehydrate with a certain amount of fluid, they it kind of becomes overwhelming, because how if they drink so much fluid, how can they actually then eat something? So it's over a period of time. It's something that you have to get them to understand, right? And the next thing is during matches, right? Here again, because team sports are so varied in how the game is played, when they get their breaks, what's the duration of the game, uh, the opportunities to drink are also varied. So some can just drink, at the sidelines, at the boundaries of their, court or field. Right? Some can drink during substitutions. Right? They substituted for a quarter, but then they're back again for the next quarter. So that's the time they get to drink. Others can drink only at halftime. Right? So that's just primary when they have to kind of get all their fluid back into the system. Right? And fluids can be tolerated. Like you'll have athletes that have varied kind of intakes when it comes to fluid. So some just do, they can barely do a couple of sips. Some can easily do 500 ml of water. So you'll have to work with them gradually on individualizing their strategy, right? But it's possible for most athletes to drink about 500 ml water, especially after they've played the first half. And we covered this slide. Again, it's just something that I'd made for the hockey, the hockey teams, to reinforce and for them to have it as little sheets that they can keep in their file. Okay, now when it comes to eating on a match day, right? When it comes to eating on a match day, with team sports, carbohydrate loading is not something that we really focus on. It's not essential, because in most team sports, before competition, there's always a week or two when they start to taper. Okay, so taper is the time when your number of sessions or the duration of training comes down, which means carbohydrate from the body is not getting used at that extent that it would have otherwise, uh, been used when they're training regularly. So during that tapering phase, you since the body is not using as much carbohydrate, there's a lot of carbohydrate that does get retained in the muscle. So just before a competition, you don't have to load somebody with do carbohydrate loading for a team sport, right? Which is maybe like say a week or 3 days or 4 days. You really don't need that. But just before the match day or the first, depending on the match time, and before that, you can start to give carbohydrate rich foods, because that's what would benefit them the most. Right. So before a match, most of you know this, focus on your carbohydrates, but some athletes also like to include some protein for satiety, right? Because otherwise carbohydrates digest very easily. And then by the time they're closer to the match, they don't want to be in that situation where they feel hungry or a little depleted of energy. So include that protein. And the ground rule is to avoid high fiber and fat meals, because it just kind of upsets the gut, or may not get digested very fast. At 1 or 2 hours before a match, definitely options like smoothies, energy bars, fruits, all of these come in handy. Dry fruits also. But this is a very textbooky, kind of uh, segregation of when to have what foods. In a real-time match scenario, sometimes 1 to 2 hours before, they're already, they've boarded the bus, right, to reach their ground venue. They have to do pre-activation. They have to then warm up on the ground. They have to have their group talk, group discussion meetings. So though you have to factor all these things in, so it may sometimes not be 1 hour before, it could be 1.5 hour before, it could be 30 minutes before. And uh, this is something which you have to understand the team dynamics and how they want to do this. If something is very essential, then even if they're having their group meeting, it's important for you to kind of let them know that, you know what, at this point, it's recommended that they eat this particular snack, so then they account for it. Because if you don't kind of let them know that, then this is something that is not extremely important, and it may get sidelined. Okay, now also after a match, these guidelines, like uh, depending on what the match scene is, right? Like if they have back-to-back matches, if they have, depending on the draws, depending on their progression during the competition, depending on just what time the match finishes, you need to have different kind of, you have to be prepared for those kind of situations, right? So these are, carbohydrates, protein, caffeine, omega-3 fluids is something I like to keep, in the match, recovery match meals for most of the team sports. Okay, so when it comes to carbohydrate, like, here on the right side of the slide, it's just for a 70-kilogram athlete, what are the carbohydrate foods they need to have at one point. So this is just, a practical situation where we're saying the match finishes at 8 p.m., right? So think about it, like 8 p.m. is sort of, it could be dinner time, but they also have to recover from the match. And the recovery foods that I've mentioned here in terms of carbohydrates may not be foods that they would have at dinner and say, okay, I'm done with this now. So psychologically, athletes may feel like having something which also feels more like a dinner meal. So understanding what time the match finishes at, when their next meal is, these are situations that you have to prep for in advance, right? Because again, then we can't go by the textbook and say post match you can give them A, B, and C, and that's going to be applicable for all situations. It may not really be the case, right? So um, carbohydrate, protein, caffeine. The reason why caffeine is mentioned there is because it may help with glycogen restoration, right? And omega-3, again, to bring down, inflammation, help with recovery, and fluids is definitely something that you have to consider for good hydration and recovery again. So, but if you have to get, for a 70 kg athlete, 1 to 1.2 grams of carbohydrates. That's somewhere between 70 to 84 grams in total. And all these foods that I've mentioned under carbohydrates give you about 20 to 25 grams. So say if they have to meet 84 grams, that's a lot of food they have to eat at that point, and then protein as well, and then fluids as well. So um, though it might seem easy when we look at it as numbers, when they have to actually take all this food in, it becomes a little bit of a struggle, to have this. Because when I was working with BFC, there was this one particular footballer that would always, any match, would lose a minimum of 2.5 liters of water. Now if I had to go by my hydration logic, if he lost 2.5 liters of water, then he needed to consume at least a minimum of 4 liters. And by consuming so much water, where's the time to, eat something? So, these are just the practical nature of team sports that you have to keep in mind. Okay, with supplements, these are, you just had a session on supplements, I think, at the end of the week. So that's all fresh in your mind. So the point that I just want to highlight here is, mostly in team sports drinks, protein powder, energy bars, multivitamins, these are supplements that are commonly used, right? But creatine and caffeine find its place because of that intermittent, sort of activity that happens with team sports, high intensity, intermittent activity. Creatine comes into place there. And a lot of the team sports also require to have very good musculature. So in terms of, say, volleyball, basketball, these are sports where their muscle mass also needs to be at a good level. So uh, the sports science department may also request for creatine, or may suggest creatine as part of the athlete's uh, diet. And then caffeine is mainly either to help them, it could be used during training, or it could be used in match day scenarios. And just one thing about caffeine is, if you're doing caffeine at a match time and it's later half in the day, it may disrupt sleep. Not only with match, it could be with training as well. So it's best to check with the athletes on how much caffeine they can do. Right, and beta alanine and bicarbonate is suggested for not suggested, but it is under the recommendations. Could be considered for team sports, but I haven't personally worked with this, and that's just something that I've not done or even come across any of my colleagues really working with this in a team sport environment. Okay, to end this session, I'd just like to uh, highlight a few more things which really add to making nutrition in a team sport more successful. Okay, so one is constant education through group sessions. So always encourage this. So take in your experience, whatever you notice in terms of, say, hydration, in terms of carbohydrates that are commonly done wrong, or areas that the team fails to meet or do, then educate them on these kind of sessions and make it very practical for them to understand. Right, after you're done with that, please summarize the session as well and give them like a little file that they can keep all of these inputs you share with them in. Cafeteria menu labeling. So for those of you who are involved in planning menus or have access to the kitchen and dining area, what I do, what I have done in the past with the different academy is have your carbohydrates, proteins, fats labeled so that athletes can actually figure out what meals to, it's constant reinforcement, because though we talk about carbohydrate, protein, and fat, when it comes to them practically translating that and putting it on their plate, they go wrong. Right? So having that carbohydrate, protein, and fat, um, kind of highlighted in front of that meal really helps the athletes to understand better. Okay, weighing scales to determine individual portion sizes. So that is something that you can also keep, and it could be done on a one-on-one basis also. Uh, Cooking skills, supermarket tours. I've had the chance to do it with one of the teams, and it was just easy because they understood what ingredients to pick, what ingredients to choose, where you have your healthy foods, where you have your junk foods, and what's important in the grocery bag of an athlete. Cooking skills we already covered, especially when they're not at home, they're not in the camp, they don't have access. Sometimes they just get stuck in that environment, and then they have to depend on somebody else, or order food, or they just keep eating very basic food which may not meet their requirements. Right? And communication of information to men and women will be very different. Right? So if you just tell a male athlete something about protein or calcium in a certain way, they tend to take that information without layering it through, and uh, for them it's like, okay, is it going to benefit my performance? That's all they need to know. Right? But for women, there are more things that you have to factor in. Right? Is it psychologically something that they would want to eat? Is it going to upset their digestive system? Is it something that they may want to grab and eat without having to think of their weight or other issues that come up? So it could be the same information that you're communicating to men and the women's team, but you have to do it a little differently. Okay, and this is just something that I've learned over the years to communicate and share with the athletes that I work with. Right? And for this presentation, I've taken concepts from these different papers, and I'm sure this the book by Dr. Gitanjali has been very useful. And I think if you're a student or even a practitioner, it's a real go-to, concise, precise, good book that you can use in your practice. All right. Thank you for listening to the session patiently. Right, are there any questions? I'd like to take it right now.
Thank you, Shona, for a wonderful session and sharing your experiences. There are a few questions in the chat box. I will
Okay.
take one by one.
Yes.
The first question is like some individuals, just a minute. Um, you must be dealing with a lot of stubborn athletes. What do you do? How do you deal with them?
Well, I think it's just the way of how you know, communicate. Like if they're stubborn about something, I let them, sometimes I just let them, you know, deal with their stubbornness, but also kind of give them another option of what they can do. Because I think they need to sometimes learn through their own mistakes.
Yeah.
So they can be stubborn about something, but they invariably can, you know, come in, because they may come around. Some are, some just, you know, refuse to listen, especially when you know, tell them about things like fat, or that, you know, additional ghee and all of that. They could be resistant, but you have to sometimes build trust. Sometimes you have to show, you know, other results. Like if they're stubborn about a particular food behavior, food change, that's not the first thing I would attack. I would go to something else, win their trust, then come back and, you know, alter that. That's worked for me mostly.
Yes. Is it the same with the coaches also?
With the coaches, like luckily I've had a very good rapport with most of the coaches I've worked with, so I haven't come across stubborn coaches, to be honest. Maybe that's just me being lucky, so I haven't I haven't come across that.
Yes. Okay, so there's one question by Shaili. Some individuals or athletes prefer a scoop of protein in very little water, but we have always learned to dilute it. What do you think about it?
Well, see,
It's a
personally,
individual
also,
choice.
I think I would like to have, why, you know, why athletes do that is because when you dilute it, the taste of protein gets, the taste also gets diluted, right? So as long as they follow it up with plain water, I'm okay with them drinking, you know, mixing their protein with lesser water. But then I always ask them to flush it down with plain water, so it's pretty much the same thing. So they do it because of the taste.
There is another question by Anuja. She's asking you how to manage meals for a night match. I think you have
So
explained already.
yeah, I think it's just about, you know, making sure, like if your match is going late into the night and you know that in advance, right? Then you have to discuss this with the team in prior, because the schedule is already set, and you know that okay, recovery is important because it may take an hour or hour and a half by the time they change, get to their rooms and all of that. So whatever they can have in their locker rooms, a little bit, that is very important in terms of carbohydrates, fluid or protein, that will be given there. And they need to be told in advance that okay, the dinners have to be lighter, maybe on this day make different, you know, food options. And that's how you have to work with the team, uh, you know, especially knowing the schedule in advance.
Yes. And is creatine advisable and for which phase?
So creatine would be advisable depending on, you know, one, is their training really involving, say, hypertrophy? Are there hypertrophy sessions involved to build muscle? That's number one. Then you would suggest it then. Again, you know, from say a pre-competitive phase, sometimes they go into this phase where they're doing a lot of high intensity training or work. So it becomes less endurance, but it becomes more high intensity, intermittent sort of training uh, with muscle, you know, building sessions, or they just have to be able to do their sessions at that high intensity, and that's when I would bring in creatine. That's at this point you have to really be in touch with your coach and the strength and conditioning, because it has to be given at the right time, because just putting it in and not doing those kind of sessions becomes pretty much useless.
Okay. There is one question. Are there any specific supplements that can be used for performance and recovery? I think you have already mentioned.
Yes, I mentioned in terms of see omega-3,
Hmm.
in terms of caffeine,
Hmm.
because omega-3 is more anti-inflammatory. Caffeine helps with restoration of glycogen, some can do that. Then there are these other, fancy things which say tart cherry juice and all of that, which actually one of the teams I worked with were able to source it, and obviously it costs a lot. So they've kept it as, okay, we're going to use it in certain matches where we've gone really all out. It won't be something where they use all the time. And again, the teams are also doing trial and error. Okay, but one thing that as nutritionists we also need to factor in is the budget, because though we may find tart cherry juice, say for example, and want to suggest it to the athlete, they don't always they may not at the end of it be able to afford it, whether it's coming from their own personal pockets or from or they've been granted that allowance. So sometimes you have to also factor them. So just stick to the basics first, because a lot of athletes don't even do that. So your carbohydrates, protein, fluid, all of these, and then you top them up with the others.
Yeah, another question is, does high protein intake and fiber affect the sleep pattern of the athletes? Again, it is very individualistic, right?
Yes, I would say so, but I think for an athlete to sleep well, as if they have disturbed sleep, I think carbohydrates are also, important. So yeah, that's something you have to take up.
And as you mentioned, there are a lot of athletes who just drink around 500 ml of water milk at bedtime, and that is their habit. I think it is there in almost all the national camps where they have the habit of gulping around 500 ml of milk before
Yes.
bedtime. So milk is again helping in sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What was the question regarding that?
It was like, does high protein intake and fiber intake from fruits
Okay.
at bedtime disturb sleep?
Yeah, but apart from protein, I think milk also has the tryptophan that
Yes.
then works to sleep well. And I think it's just a habit, something that is comfortable for them. So they do that.
Yes. There is another question is, how does caffeine help in glycogen storage?
So caffeine just enables, like I can't give you the science of it right now, right? But there are lots of papers that do do highlight this thing, that when the body has caffeine and you're also consuming glycogen, the muscle carbohydrates, the body is able to store and kind of make sure that it gets restored into the muscles at a faster rate than just having carbohydrates.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering all the queries. And it was a very wonderful and a very comprehensive session. A lot of takeaways from you and your practical experience of working with the Indian hockey team, men's and women's team. So we wish you all the best for all your future endeavors, and looking forward to have you again on these sessions. Very informative, and thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, Gitanjali, for the opportunity, and everyone at ASNFS.
Yes. There is one announcement that tomorrow we are going to start with the physiotherapy sessions, and the sessions will be free for the life members of the association, and the links will be shared by email. So we are looking forward for the physiotherapy sessions in the next week. Thank you so much, Shona.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Kindly fill the
Thanks so
form.
much. Thank you, Gitanjali ma'am. Yeah, please
Kindly
fill up
fill
the
the
feedback
form so
form.
that we can issue the certificate. The certificate will be emailed to you. All those who are members, please fill the form.
And we will be uploading this on social media platform, or we will be mailing it to you. So please wait for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Shona.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.